Wicked. Okay, so some people have heard of Meteor, some people, few have used it. It's pretty fresh on the scene, I guess, and in a world where there's so many JavaScript frameworks for every single thing, it's pretty understandable if you were to ignore or miss something like this. So, of the things you can do with JavaScript, you've got front-end frameworks, you've got build tools, you've got all your server-side logic, and Meteor essentially does all of these things and a little more. So where you have Angular in your front end, Meteor supplies your templating and your data. We have build tools. Meteor runs as a command line tool. It handles all of your compilations. It handles your package management, and it handles even deployment. And then it also is your server as well. So there's a component of Meteor that's a command line tool, and you can get that probably by going online and Googling it, I guess. So you're going to install it. It's a command line tool. Maybe I don't have an internet connection here. Oh well. It's really easy to find online, I'm sure, so I'm not going to worry about it. I got it. I don't even remember the process. It's a super easy install. And so what you end up with is, let's just make a new directory here. Oop. So we're going to do Meteor create, and we'll just call this FA. So it's going to pull down a handful of packages and create this like really simple little project for us. So in our project, we have a CSS file, an HTML file, and a JavaScript file. To launch the development server, all you do is type Meteor, and it's going to go out and it's going to pull all the required packages for this whole system. So while our file structure is really simple, there's a lot going on in the background. It's going to come preloaded with like jQuery underscore, but then as well, all of this like internal templating stuff. And as well, since we're running our development server locally, it's got that server as well, which isn't a fully unique system. It's all built on Node, and so it's a lot of the good stuff you get there with just a little speedy handling. And then for data persistence, it also runs MongoDB. So if you're not familiar with MongoDB, it's a database. Unlike MySQL or Postgres, it has no schema, so you can add documents to this database. You don't have to define anything ahead of time. You can just kind of add at will, and it'll accept whatever you give it. So in the meantime, we pulled all our packages and we launched our server. So let's open it up and see what we got. So we get a really sweet beginner program, web app here. We have a button that says click me, and when you click it, the number increments. Sweet. So let's, I don't think it gets better than that, really. What did I call it? FA. So let's check out these files. Get rid of that. Okay, so here we are again. We've got our CSS, our HTML, and our JavaScript file. So the seed project that it's going to start you with is obviously trying to clarify just how simple these Meteor apps can be. There's a whole philosophy on how you should structure these in terms of folders and how you're actually going to categorize your assets. But with Meteor, you also don't really have to. You can just kind of throw a bunch of files in, and it's going to, at runtime, grab them all and spit out what it thinks you should have. So in a way, it's I've never really worked with Ruby a whole lot, but it's definitely the convention over configuration model. The whole philosophy is that you do as little as possible. And I mean, already, I already had the command line tool installed, but already we have a development server up. We're looking at our awesome app, and we've got our sweet files here. So within this package, we don't have any CSS. That's pretty clear. What you do get with Meteor is built-in browser sync. So anytime you're updating any of these files in your project directory, it's automatically going to send those down the wire into your browser. Which, if you've ever dealt with Grunt and tried to build your own tools just to have browser sync or something, it's amazing, and it's comparatively to how much work it takes. Maybe it's kind of easy, but it's still a pain in the ass. So to just have all that wired is kind of handy. So in our JavaScript file, we kind of experience what makes Meteor really an interesting piece of software. So we have one JavaScript file in our project. Within this file, we've got these two conditionals. So one is Meteor is client, the other is server. So this means that this same JavaScript file is interpreted both by the client and by the server when handling your app. So really, when Node kind of first hit the scene, it was like, oh wow, you can write the same language for front end and back end, but you're still using, Express in the back end and then Angular in the front end. You're not really speaking the same language. In Meteor, you totally are. Like, you are using literally the same file for both your server, front, and back. Since this is a front end meetup, we're not going to worry about any server code. So let's look at the rest of this. So out of Meteor, you get a few things handed to you. And let's actually start with the HTML file for that. So first thing you should notice about our HTML file here is that it's lacking a lot of typical HTML stuff, like an HTML, like a doc type tag, any of that kind of business. That's not to say that it's not injected into your source, but you don't worry about that in your file. There's also a lot of, this is a small sample of all those packages that are being pulled in. And granted, this is all for just your front end, but it works out.
Is there a way to concatenate all those in like one HTTP request as opposed to multiple?
Yeah, so this is only displayed like this because it's in development mode. So as soon as you deploy, it's going to do like the standard, compile everything, give it the uglification, slap a hash on the file name, and make it good and ready. So we don't worry about a lot of the typical HTML conventions. We just kind of put in the bare minimum for it to get what it needs, and it's going to take it and go from there. So the next thing in the HTML that we have is this little template tag. So we have a template, name attribute is hello, and we've got our content. And so where we've defined this template, we bring it into our layout here with the double curly brace, and then bring in the hello. So we could make two of those pretty easily. And what we could also do is tweak our inner template as well. So that's all pretty basic stuff. So if we were making a app of some sort, and I went through a couple ideas of things to do here, but one of the key factors of Meteor and what it's designed for is building apps that are real time. So what you get here that you don't have with something just like a back-end framework is Meteor's actually wired from the server right to the client directly with WebSockets. So rather than just the server serving a page, loading it up in the browser, there's this open connection right now between the server and the browser. And that's not just because we're in development mode, that's not just browser sync, that's how Meteor works. So what it's designed for is live, real-time, things updating based on changes that the users are making in the system or changes in the database, what have you. So to play around with that a little bit, let's do, let's see if I can remember the syntax. So in our file, we're just going to make a really basic for each loop where we're going to iterate through an array of things. And we'll call this the posts. And we'll drop our post in. So then let's go back to our JavaScript file real quick. Before we start making posts, let's look at a few things in the JavaScript. Meteor introduces a number of globals to your JavaScript, the first of which is Meteor, and that's got a number of methods on it that allow you to interact with users and all sorts of kind of the core Meteor functions. Then you have Session, which is, I don't know what actual technology it uses, but it's all just temporary storage for that session. So our little clicker here is, that's all stored in a session variable. And if you look at the syntax here, storing something like that's pretty trivial. We create a session called counter, initialize it at 0, and then a little further down, we actually return the value of that session, and then we have a button which increments that. So if we look at this a little closer here, we've got these two template objects. I should actually go back here and undo a few stages. Okay, so we're back to hello. So in our JavaScript, we've got template.hello.helpers. So this is how we're actually going to attach logic to things in our page. So we've got a template. It's called hello. That's purely where this template is defined, is that name attribute. So in our JavaScript, we can call the template object, call hello. That's going to exist for us because Meteor knows that template exists, and now we can attach things to it. So the first property is helpers, which helpers basically feed to these little variables. So where we display counter, that's a helper. So we have template.hello.helpers, and we're going to pass it an object with a property called counter, which is going to refer to the name we want to use in our template. And then we say what we want to return to that value. So in this case, we're returning the value of this session. But we could just as easily say Mike's a jerk, and there we go. So we attach logic to these templates, these little components, and then we can feed data out to them from our JavaScript. So those are helpers, and you could pass a string there. You could be passing other information. You could be manipulating information. It's pretty open in terms of what you can do. And then the other side of the paradigm is how we actually add behavior to the page, and that's with events. So same format, templates.hello.events. Same deal. We pass it the object, and then we're going to have a property, which is just going to have a string name, and the first word is going to be the event, and then you just have a standard CSS style selector. So name your event, whatever you want to apply that event to, and name your element, whatever event you want it to respond to, and then you give it the functionality you want. So in this case, we pass a function that's setting counter, just incrementing the counter. So really simple. So HTML, kind of like just strip down HTML, and then you have this easy template syntax. And your JavaScript is all built around being kind of intuitive as possible, while still being true to JavaScript. And in a way, it seems to me, Angular was originally designed to be easy for designers to use, and that was the original purpose of Angular. And it seems like it's kind of gone away from that, but this seems so much more intuitive to me than something like Angular. And way just like results right out of the box. So that's the basics. Any questions yet? Yes.
Well, earlier I thought to try to imagine how you might work Angular with this. This looks more like a replacement for Angular.
Yeah.
All the clicks and the.
Yeah. So it's like out of the box, you don't need Angular for this. It's got its own logic for that. You could run Angular on top of Meteor, but yeah, I mean, a lot of what you're getting here is, all of this convenience.
How about like if you want to lay a bootstrap front end on this in terms of the UI? I mean, it looks like they use non-standard tags, and you're in Meteor land.
So that.
Opposed to like more HTML, which is what you might normally use for like bootstrap or something like that.
So within this, you still have all of the same concepts, classes and IDs and everything. So if you did just have a Bootstrap library loaded, you could still pull from that.
Okay.
Now what you get with Meteor that I haven't really gone into yet is also package management. So in addition to all these other things, the build tools, all of that, it's also your Bower or your NPM. For those of you that don't know, Bower you can use on your local system, and it will. You can use it to just install packages like jQuery or whatever you want, Bootstrap. And NPM is similar. You can use it on your desktop, or you can also use it on your server to pull all of your server components down from these repositories. So despite the fact that Meteor is node-based, they have seeked out to make their own package management system, because Meteor packages are really designed for use in Meteor, and they can inject functionality in places where just bringing in a simple package isn't really what it's involved with. And a good example of that. So we're just going to jump over to the command line here and Meteor list, I believe, and let's look for Sass. What is it? Meteor search, probably. So it's got its whole own package repository. You can install node packages just right off of NPM. It's a slightly different process, but there's totally support for that. But the idea is not so much a walled garden, but just to have these packages separate so that they're very easy to come across and very easy to use. And one of the best examples of this whole package management system, that's right. What's up with the internet?
Yeah, the internet kind of stinks. You want to connect to my iPhone?
I don't know. You gonna charge me?
No, you can connect to it. It's like Michael's iPhone.
Is it on?
Yeah. Right there, Michael's iPhone.
Mm.
The password is Leakebo, Leaktebo.
Leaktebo.
Tebow.
Such a jerk after all.
There you go. No, you gotta put the E in there. Come on, man.
Oh, you said E at the end?
No.
What, dude? Come on, dude. Say it again.
There's
Come on. Come here. What are you saying? Oh. There you go. Like Tebow.
It's been like my Wi-Fi. You guys can connect at my house now too. It's been like my Wi-Fi password since like 2006. Which is why we won that year.
Is that your email too?
Yeah. Hey. But yeah.
I heart Tebow.
You are recording this video, so.
Oh shit.
Who doesn't use it?
Beep.
What
Oh, cool. All right. So Meteor search Sass, and we get a list of various packages. Now you're going to kind of run into a situation that you run into with any of these frameworks where anybody can release a package. Eventually there's going to be a lot of them, and it's kind of an ordeal sorting through them. I've used Particle 4 Dev Sass before, and it seemed to work okay. So let's just do Meteor add package name, and now it's going to go pull the package, add it to the Meteor directory, update the equivalent of the package JSON, which just is a manifest of what packages this whole application relies on. And once this is installed, rather than when you want to start using Sass in your own workflow and you need to go learn about how to install the right version of Ruby, so you've got that handy, and then you need to add it to your build tools. Instead of all that, this just integrates right into your existing workflow. So let's just rename my CSS file, and let's do, what's the variable syntax? What is it?
Variable is dollar.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, so some real basic syntax.
You need the dollar again.
I need the dollar. Oh yeah.
Right side.
Jeez. What a slacker. So anyhow, so there we go, and look at that, it's red again. So all we had to do was add the package, and it's wired it in. It automatically compiles it. We didn't really have to think about anything. And the same holds true with Bootstrap. I mean, just about any package that's popular out there now is going to be available here. And there's, because they have their own package management system, they also have their own little package manager website where you can go and you can read these and get up to date on what does what and where the functionality is. But for something like Sass, you just drop it in and go, yes sir.
So if you didn't have Ruby installed, would it install it in the background, or?
I want to say, I know some of them use libsass. I mean, just looking at the list, you have one that's, I'm going to presume that's a Ruby dependency. I don't think it's going to go install Ruby. I think that's probably too, yeah, I would think so, but yeah. Who knows?
I install on the Mac anyway.
Yeah. Crappy internet here, man.
So the one question I had was, I kind of looked at Meteor. I'm always scared of frameworks that kind of try to do too much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you want to pull out a piece of this thing, and next thing you know, you're into it. This is like front end, back end. So it seems like you're committed pretty hard to Meteor if you go down this route.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
you wouldn't take this out of Meteor without a complete rewrite. I mean,
Right.
granted, we don't have a whole lot of time on our app yet, but this is all dependent on Meteor. And when you're using Meteor, one of the main things you're interested in is this data layer between the server and the client, and this constant WebSocket. I mean, you can wire those things up by hand fairly easily these days, but you get all of that on top of Mongo. And then as well, the subject that we haven't even gotten into, which is reactive data. So let's do this real quick. See if I can not screw up any of the syntax. Even though like a blog format is totally not warranted of a full live WebSocket connection, it's all I can think of right now. So, okay, so we got for each post, stick the post in there, and now let's do some other things here. Let's give our little post a title. Probably not in the button. Mix tab stuff's killing me. Okay, so let's just leave it at that for now. So we've got a template. It's not linked up to anything in the JavaScript yet, so it's probably gonna cause some errors and stuff. So our server's crashed. It doesn't like what it sees. So let's fix it. So we'll get rid of all that. We're just going to stick within the client with the exception of one thing. So while most of your code is, both your server and your client need to be aware of it, there's definitely code that belongs in one place and belongs in the other as well. So of the things that really need to be shared code are information about your collections. And I kind of always forget the syntax for the collection, so let's just do how could you forget that? I must have a learning disability. So for both our server and our client, they should both know about this collection of posts. We want them to share that information at the very least. Things like click events, server doesn't care about that, so it doesn't really need to know. And in fact, for a lot of those sort of things, it will throw an error if that information tries to get interpreted by the server. But so if our server and our client know about this collection, then that brings about another interesting point of Meteor, which is, we're not just taking a bunch of data, processing it, and giving it to the client in form of just static HTML. It's also aware of this Mongo collection, which means that it can actually, as it receives data, it builds its own data set of what's in the Mongo database on the server. So it starts to almost locally cache the data, which means that it can respond to events. If it has the data that it already knows, it can display that before it gets command from the server. If there's a user event, like delete this post, the client has a pretty good idea that it's allowed to delete this post, so it will go ahead and the post will disappear before the server has even had a chance to authorize that and return word back. So that's where Mongo gets really interesting, is that without relying on the server to say yes or no to everything, you can almost completely circumvent a lot of typical latency within a normal web app. So we've got our post collection. We've got a little loop through our posts. Let's see if we can add something to it. So all we did is we added posts, and did I screw something else up here? Each posts looks pretty legit. Okay, well, let's just cheat then. Looks totally identical. Restart. Expected tag to close each found posts. What's going on, man? Got mixed tabs and spaces too. It's all chaos. Okay, cool. So it's up and running now. It didn't like the session, or the counter, I guess. Or maybe it didn't like the tabs and spaces. All right, so rather than have an interface right now to add posts, we're going to cheat a little bit here. And because the client knows about this Mongo collection, it's also made that available as a global in the, as a global. So because it's a Mongo collection, we can actually use Mongo syntax in the browser console, and we can insert an object. We'll just make it empty. And it's give it a title. Man. Oh, so we're kind of there. We're kind of like halfway there. So we've got our template ready, but you know what we're missing is something to return these posts. So we need to write our helper for our template. So I'm going to cheat a little bit here since we don't actually have anything inside of a template here in the body. We're going to use a different syntax than the template dot whatever. So UI.body is essentially helpers that are applied to the global space. So posts, we're going to say return posts find. So I don't think you need the empty braces even. Cool. So now we actually have a post that shows up. And let's so now if I create another post with a different title, it's going to render there as well. Now, because we have this crazy live connection, I'm executing these commands in the console, but it's actually updating the database on the server, so this is all persistent. And just like that, we're outputting posts. So we could throw a description in here as well. And I could save this. It's going to look inside of these post objects for description. There's nothing there in any of these posts, but we could add another one. Blow that up. Man, do you guys deal with that ever? This little drop down thing, man, that drives me nuts.
Never.
Kills me.
Maybe you have a learning deficiency.
I think that's implied. So this is Mongo syntax, so this might not look all that familiar to anyone, but we can just call our collection, and then you have all of these different methods. So right here we could also query the database. We could just say find anything. And it needs a callback though, so that's actually not really a great example. But so going back to making our posts, we've got a title. Let's create a description on this next one. That outputs as well. So just like that, now we've got data persisting on the server and spitting right back out on the page. So right now we're creating these in the console, which doesn't seem like it's, you know, you could write a lot of things where you could put stuff in the console and it's going to appear on the page. So what you can also do is we can fire up the connection to the database and the server. And let's see here. Whoa. So now we can, let's see if we're in. Okay, cool. So db.posts, we can look at our posts that are there. And this is how data is stored in Mongo. It's basically, for the most part, it mimics JSON. It's just, you know, how things look in Mongo. So now we're going to do db.posts. And from here, it's indert. It's the same syntax as we were using in the console, so we're going to pass it an object, title, probably going to need some quotes on that. Description. So I just inserted that on the server and it appeared in the browser immediately, which is what you get with Meteor. And if you stick with their conventions in what's called reactive programming, you're essentially writing declarative code that says, you know, when there's an update here, this should happen. And for something as rudimentary in the Mongo world as or in the Meteor world as a Mongo collection, it kind of handles all that for you. So I have this function that just says return posts, just return all the posts, and it knows if there's ever a change in the database to the posts collection to immediately update the client and rebuild that. So that's a little crazy. So any questions?
How does it know what data the helpers depend on or you make use of?
So now do you mean within the templates like these fields, or?
I mean, in the JavaScript file, the previous example had a helper that was outputting a session variable.
Yeah.
And in this example, it's outputting some data, but you didn't tell it that this helper, when the session variable changes, this helper needs to be rerun. It was able to introspect it somehow.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how it does that.
Well, so the session is a global, it's instantiated by Meteor, so it's pre-wired for all that reactive juice. So if you stick to its core components, then pretty much everything's reactive out of the box. If you're just dealing with the session and with Mongo, then all of your functions are going to be executed on their own. And if you sidestep this and try and do something weird, then in a lot of cases you will lose that reactive nature. Like actually in a demo of this, when I was playing around with this idea earlier this month, I caught myself trying to use the context of this function, which let's see what you get here. It's executed each time in the context. Actually, I guess this isn't, but events are. So I was using context to try and change something in the database, and rather than using the actual collections object and like a Mongo method, just nothing would happen. So if you stick to its methods, then you get all of that out of the box.
So for example, if you have a session variable and you know how you pass it a string to tell it which variable to actually return from the function.
Yeah.
If that string was somehow dynamic, let's say based on a time or something, it couldn't introspect that and see that. It couldn't go through all the times in the future and go, oh, whenever any of these session variables update for all the times in the future, we need to rerun this function and output it,
Well, maybe. Or, it might be kind of assume that what you're storing in the session isn't such a great amount of information that if something in the session changes, then maybe kind of refresh all the sources or all the feeds. Maybe, I don't know. That'd be something to play with, though. Any other questions?
So I noticed, at least in this simple example, the template was right in the view thing. What's their strategy for like using Grow templating and partials?
So you basically, Meteor totally uses the asset pipeline concept. So we can create a folder in here and call it, templates. And then in here we'll create posts. And we will, create a file in there.
What is the asset pipeline concept?
What Rails uses for managing all of its assets.
I know that, but like explain that.
Well, the way it works it's introduced in Rails 3.2, not sure. And it's just the same kind of stuff behind the scenes. It'll like do the compilation of SAS, and when you're deploying, it'll thumbprint, it'll upify, minify, and do all that stuff.
So it's just like the deploy to production process?
Yeah, but what I was wondering about is, I noticed you went to the command line. It looked like it had a scaffolding component built in, like a generator.
Mm-hmm.
Does that generate everything you need? Like, generate posts that you're starting from scratch. It'll generate all the files you need.
I don't think that it really, it doesn't deal so much with those specifics. It's such a bizarre picture. So it's not like, add or create a collection or anything. It doesn't really, aside from creating your project and, spitting out just a little basic seed, unless it says something here that I'm that I'm not aware of, which very well could. It doesn't so much as do like build your controllers for you or create this model. And in fact,
But there's like a set way you should approach that.
there's a recommended way, but then it's loose enough where, you know, they definitely encourage you to like find the way that works best for you, which might be nightmarish for a lot of applications. But yeah, basically, and there's basically folder keywords within your project. So if you create a folder called server, all of that information will only be available to the server, similar with public. And so what I just did here is I just moved the post template into a directory a few nodes out, and so cool. So it found that, and it did everything that you would expect it to. And so what they kind of encourage is not so much a specific MVC philosophy, but more so, break your application into components. And with this method, inside of our posts folder, inside of our templates directory, this is where we'd also probably create our logic for our posts. So we drop our JavaScript in here and our CSS as well, and it's going to pull all that at build time, and it's going to use it where it should. But in a way, it's kind of like a really lazy web component or something in my mind. It's like, rather than having to learn what to do with Shadow DOM, just put it in a folder and then call it in with a template syntax.
Does this support any other databases, or is it just Mongo?
I believe right now it's just Mongo. I think there are some developers out there trying to add drivers for Postgres or something. But
is there anything to prevent people from going into the console and just obliterating your entire production database?
It's an amazing question. So yeah, obviously this is like a really flawed design if anyone can go modify anything. And in fact, we're not really using any users, but in this state, all user data could also be modified right from the console. So the reason for this, and it's a funny point because it always comes up with anything about Meteor. So when we start our Meteor project, we get a handful of Meteor packages, and for the most part, these are the core components that Meteor runs on. One of these packages is called Insecure, and it's basically, it establishes this mode where all data from the server is made entirely available to the client, aptly named Insecure. So by removing that, you cut out that whole link, and at that point, the only data that's available to the client is data which you explicitly publish for it. So it kind of complicates the design process some.
So you put an access layer between each piece of data and the current user or something?
Essentially, and it's all within the same minimal, see there it is, allow all database rights by default. And then auto-publish being the other one. So you actually have these two packages which make your app really easy to really screw up, but what it's all there for is just to make it as easy and as dead simple to build out as possible. So you remove those, and if I did now, everything would just break all of a sudden because there's not even anything publishing posts. And while it's fairly easy to bring that all back online, it's probably more than worth going into. And then you have to start writing that server-side JavaScript, which still resides in the same file, and it's all pretty much the same syntax. The main difference is that you create what's called Meteor methods. So rather than in our JavaScript where we just say return posts where we're basically interacting directly with the collection, you just have a layer in between that where you create these methods, and then you can perform authentication and decide whether or not. But those methods are still defined in that public space between client and server, so the client can anticipate what that method will do and act accordingly.
How does it handle catch-ups and reconciliation if clients are kind of on?
So if there's disparity in the data, then it just updates as soon as it can. As soon as it knows that something's wrong, then it changes. It just updates the UI. And in terms of other clients, it's I have never seen it at scale, and considering it's WebSockets, I'd be a little scared to imagine what would happen when you really have a serious at-scale application. At that point, you're dealing more with clustering out your servers so that it can handle so many concurrent TCP connections. But
So two people edit the document, both are offline. One needs to change after the person, the first guy, or the second guy comes online first, the first guy comes in after him. Like, how do you?
Well, I think. So yeah, to be fair, I have no idea. It's not necessarily designed to be like an offline access sort of thing. So, there's got to be. I'm sure there's a convention for being prepared for that, but it might just be first come, first serve, and if it's been modified, come the second guy's request, then he just gets the shaft. I don't know. Cool. I could keep going on this, or we could move on to something else.
So we got Matt Stauffer isn't showing up tonight because he knew that Eran was going to be here.
It's wise of him.
Devore is going to talk about a website he launched. I'm going to talk about a website I launched. I have a question for the group. Like this really hard problem that I want, like I'm profiling Scroll events, that I want to get some people's opinions on because I know there's people that might have some ideas on it. So we have like all that, and we have about an hour, maybe about an hour. So I don't know if you have something like you want to touch on or something like that. Feel free.
One of the last things that would be fun to throw in here, and it might take me a second to code up, but one of the things, yet another little tidbit of Meteor that I left out. It's mostly for the purpose of just drumming up support from developers, but one of the things you get with Meteor as well is managed by the group that produces Meteor deployment and testing servers. So if I want to actually push this out and show it to somebody, I don't have to worry about what I'm going to do in terms of how I'm actually going to make this work. That's just yet another command here from the Meteor CLI, Meteor deploy, and this actually takes a bit because it's going to deploy our amazing application and then build all of the server modules for it as well.
I'm going to turn off my phone.
Don't do it.
I have a comment. Man, I don't know if you were at the last presentation, but I gave a presentation on Firebase. Does this, but not in such. It has a whole back. I don't know if you're familiar with it at all.
Yeah,
That's
somewhat.
It's basically a real-time back end, but you just inject a tiny bit of JavaScript in your side, and you have full control of your codes. You can use Angular, Backbone,
Well,
jQuery at the front end, and not get so tied up in all this gobbledygook.
yeah. Well, and Firebase is just a database as a service, right?
No, it's a full-time, real-time engine that you have.
So it's
It'll push back events into your code. Like if you go to the database, and it has a nice GUI backend Mongo-like database that you can push data in, and all of a sudden your client's got data.
cool.
You recorded the presentation, Eran, if you want to watch it.
Is it on the YouTube? I didn't.
Yeah.
Well, you can do the tutorial in 5 minutes, and it basically covers what you did in about 5 lines of code.
Sure.
And you have full control of your JavaScript now, so you're not into this. You don't have to learn any Meteor. You could use your same jQuery in 5 lines of code, essentially do everything you saw. Just for reference.
You suck, Eran.
Well, I guess I'll give my money back. I mean, every tool has its purpose.
In 5 minutes, you can see that it solves many of the same problems.
I mean, I would say everything about this is far easier than Angular, or Ember for that matter. I mean, this is dead simple to wire up. And then does Firebase handle, I mean, if I want to use SAS, does it build my,
So it doesn't, see, what difference is it doesn't get into specifying anything to do with your client code. You
Mhm.
can have just no other libraries at all, straight 5 lines of JavaScript, and this thing you just did there is done.
well, so, but if you want it to be a live WebSocket and you want SAS, then, I mean, then you're adding all these packages and you're wiring this back up. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, this is solving potentially a different problem than that,
But it
but,
does more, right?
yeah, they all, I mean, that's the story with these frameworks is everything has a place.
That only solves the one piece of the puzzle.
Anything else substantial built
Great.
on here yet, or?
There are a few apps, none that I'm like, that are so amazing I know off the top of my head.
Was there?
My internet's terrible here, so.
Yeah, you know what? Like, I wonder. Like around 5 o'clock, I started having Cox internet issues at my house, and then I can hear the internet's not working. I wonder if like these guys are on Cox too.
Maybe, I was here at 4 and it was working.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I won't bother deploying it then, but
Would you use it for like a consulting project or like how sure of it?
I guess that's the feeling I'm getting. It's not to take away from your presentation.
Say yes.
I've yet to have a purpose that really needs it, like you know, something that actually demands and really requires WebSockets. Like, it's really cool to play with, and they have like one like really basic tutorial, and then one that actually gets into how they recommend you build out your whole project. And I would say that it's really cool for the sake of learning. I've yet to have a need, like any valid need for WebSockets to begin with, other than like cool pet projects, like controlling LEDs on my Raspberry Pi. But yeah. The day that I do have a need for something that's, you know, real time, like I would definitely really consider using it. At the moment, and I think this is where most of the community is it's just cool, and it's, you know, there's a lot of backing behind it. One of the things that's been off-putting to me is, for some reason, I'm really comfortable with like the mean stack, like, you know, that seems fine to me, but for some reason, you know, with this black box concept, like deploying your server is a little more unusual compared to the typical node project. So I could see it taking some getting used to in that respect too, but not to talk you guys out of it, because I think it's really cool. But, I mean, obviously, look at that. All right.
Good if you want to get up and running, click.
Yeah, and it's about, like, I don't know, maybe it's like a hackathon platform more than anything else, because it's, you know, super easy to work on locally, and then you have free deployment for testing and showing off as well. Now, cool. Any other questions?
Thank you, Larry. I'll be back. No, I'll be back. Just have to go later.
We can stop the recording.
Oh, it just hides, huh?
Yeah, you can right click on it in your dock. Go stop.
Mm-hmm.